Turk, Muhammad Jihad.
Welcome. This is Blacklisted News Radio. It's the 11th day of January 2014. Kick-starting the new year, looking at a lot of news and the trending topics at blacklistednews.com. By the way, my name is Doug Owen. I am your host for the next hour. This podcast, we do it live each and every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. You can join us live at blacklistedраdio.com. We have an interactive chat room there. And, of course, if you'd like to interact with the show, you can always tweet at us at BLN Radio. That's the handle for the show. And you can text us, 512-222-3067. Hope you have your coffee or adult beverage if you're listening to this in the evening hours. All right, so one of the things that we try to do with the show is expand the listening audience. It's pretty much the paramount goal. It is the one thing that we really spend more of our time doing than anything else. And I saw this article yesterday, and I think that it really does set up an interesting conversation about social networking and, well, Google primarily. Google is going to be the main focus for at least 30 minutes or so, and there's a lot of things to discuss about Google and why it is more in our faces than ever. And, of course, the ties to the military-industrial complex now becoming the number one contractor, on path to be the number one military contractor, period. So that brings up a lot of interesting topics, does it not? So this man gets arrested. You may have heard about the story because his Google Plus sent an automatic invitation to his girlfriend who had been in the process or had a restraining order put against him. So obviously, guy might have some issues. Who knows what really happened between these two people and the fallout, and really none of that matters. Most of the people I've seen talking about this, the few in the mainstream media, have really looked at the character of the people and the maybe the quality of the reporting around his character. But this guy, Gagnon, that's his last name, he's 32, and basically his fiance took out a restraining order against him. Google Plus sent her an invite to join the network. And it's very reminiscent of this conversation that we had earlier, my friend and I, about him getting Google Plus invitations from me. So he sent me this email. Let me go ahead and just pull it up real quickly here. But, he said, he saw the article. He said, the exact same thing is happening to me from you. And so he forwarded me this email. It says, see what Doug Owen is sharing with you. Doug Owen has added you to his Google Circles. Take a look at what he's sharing and then add him back to see more of his posts. Now, I've recently started using the Google Plus. Very limited usage of Google Plus, and I haven't figured out a way to kind of integrate it like I have with most of the other social networking platforms that we use into taking on or feeding RSS updates to all of these different platforms because, quite honestly, you can't spend every minute of the day being social. Although the government would love that because you're forthcoming with so much of your personal information and, there's a lot of money in big data. So they love when you're social with everything that you're eating, everything that you're doing. It creates quite a profile. Beyond just the metadata, beyond, if you look at some of the things that are happening, Ford Motor Company is basically retracting one of its head honcho statements about being able to monitor all criminal activity with GPS. Now, let's be honest. If you were to say, man, the government and the motor companies are monitoring everybody, man, they know what everybody's doing. A few years ago, you would have been kind of a crazy kook conspiracy theorist. Now this is just the day and age that we live in. It's the new reality. So anyway, I wrote back what a piece of crap Google Plus is, and I don't even know how to really turn off the Google Plus. If you start messing with Google Plus, if you've ever decided to, I'll give it a try. I'll give it a go. quickly I realized that this is no Twitter. This is just, it's confusing. But I see people every day saying, getting emails, updates, saying that they're now following me on the Google Plus. But, if one of those people put out a restraining order against yours truly, then I may have some problems. I might be Google Plusing people I have no idea of. So basically, this guy who was doing everything that I guess the law required sent out this automated invitation without his knowledge. His attorney, Neil Hurryman, said that his client had no control over the message and did not mean for it to be sent due to restrictions put in place by the restraining order. Salem News reported that Hurrian said Google operates differently than Facebook, where users personally select which friends are extended requests. That's what I don't like about these social networking platforms. Twitter's pretty straightforward. I haven't messed with LinkedIn or any of these others beyond Facebook, and trying to think, I don't really mess with that many of them. But Google Plus, I was dipping my toes into Google Plus for a moment. And if you use any of the Google products, if you have a Google device, an Android device, maybe a phone, a Google phone, I mean, you're getting into the matrix. You're getting into this machine, and you don't know what the hell it's doing. I mean, ultimately, you want some control over who you're befriending. Now it's pretty AI. Oh, you don't know. You don't need to know who you are sending or extending invites to. It doesn't matter because we know better. So I think they may be on the hook for this. They have been really putting a lot of money into the mapping system, which gives me a lot of heebie-jeebies, kind of a foreboding feeling when I hear about the extended reach of Google. This is one that has probably very little impact in the media today, with all of the other things that are happening that Google is doing. But anyway, I hope this guy gets a lot of money. He'll probably sue Google, and hopefully that will change to some, or create some policy changes that, maybe push a little bit more privacy policy into the way that these companies operate. Yeah, don't hold your breath. Extreme Tech has this one. Google has built a neural network to identify 100 million house numbers for Street View. Doesn't know where all of you are yet. Doesn't quite know. It's going to find out, though. It wants to. Having spent some time on the internet, you have no doubt been forced to prove your humanity by typing words and numbers into CAPTCHA. Yeah, have you? Most of you have. If you're listening to this show, you have to be at least a little bit tech savvy. Google's own reCAPTCHA variant has been used not only to keep bots at bay, but to help the search giant identify the text in scanned books, house numbers, as well from Street View. Pretty ingenious. And I've seen these before. You're like, what are these numbers? What are we looking at here? You're helping the machine. And this is what reCAPTCHA does. They go through books and they take texts that they cannot interpret through their reader system, and they get your help. And it is pretty ingenious, and it is I guess just the next level. I mean, Google knows pretty much everything. They have mapped all of the terrain. They are the next Terra big tech project that is, or conducting it, that is going to really, I think, encompass the Earth. They are the next generation of explorers. You know, most of the Earth has been explored at this point, minus underneath the oceans, but they are getting more intuitive by the day. Although I was trying to use the voice function to do a Google search, and now Google, you've noticed you can use the microphones if you've played with it. You may realize that Google, thank God, has no idea really what we're doing. It has no idea what the hell I'm saying. And so if you're talking to friends, you should probably just throw a lot of slang in there and kind of mix and muddle your words together. It has no idea what this podcast, or what the people that leave voice messages on one of our automated lines says. You know, Google, when I get a message, I get the email, and it tries its best to tell me what it's saying, and thank goodness it has no idea. But this is 2014. You know, 2020, it's going to be a different story. I mean, if you look at how the technology has progressed, I read a story that almost becomes passe in milquetoast, saying that Google is trying to get you to ingest chips. It's not a new idea, and they already have these capsules that have cameras in it that can look at your digestive system. You eat it, crap it out, they hook it up to a computer. After hopefully they wash it, and voila. And now with near frequency conductivity, NFC, near frequency, some of these other protocols for, beyond RFID, beyond, prox readers and the like. I mean, some of the technology and the amount of information they give you is stunning. And if you have a gut problem, it's a good thing. It's great. It's great that it's a lot better than having that scope thing go down your throat and then possibly give you other complications that are not foreseen. Had this happen to a friend of mine. They had to go back and, after scoping his gut, they had to go back and fix his esophagus, and the little flapper thing in there wasn't working anymore. And basically, all of the stomach acid was just oozing out of into his throat, out of his mouth. And great situation. So anyway, some of the more novel things that you can opt out of. Many of you say, well, Google Plus, I'm not going to use that. And people that do, I'm going to, shoot them to my spam bin. I'm running my own email server. Some of you have isolated yourself from this, and I think it's great to do that. But Google is on the warpath. The U.S. military on path to become Google's single largest customer. So when you think about that and all the people that use Google services and all of the people that search, and you would think somehow quantify into the customer base. I don't know how many of you actually send money to Google or how many people do, but their products obviously make a lot of money. Their search engine has extended to now where they're military contractors, and most of you know that they just purchased Boston Dynamics. The Daily Caller reports this. Google CEO Larry Page has rapidly positioned Google to become an indispensable U.S. military contractor. Google recently purchased Boston Dynamics, a robotics pioneer that produces amazing humanoid robots for the U.S. Defense Department. This development invites attention to Google's broader military contracting ambitions, especially since Boston Dynamics is the 8th robotics company that Google has bought in the last 6 months. Yeah, and this is just the military hardware. Let's not forget all the human genome and sequencing companies like 23andMe and other CIA startups that Google has worked with, and the fact that they're getting tax-free gas for their executive ownership. Larry Page and other CEOs don't pay. Well, anyway, there's a big scandal about it, and I don't want to rehash the whole thing, but the bond between the military, the intelligence agencies, of course the NSA and CIA, in Google is well noted. Just like drones are the future of air warfare, humanoid robots and self-driving vehicles will be the future of ground warfare, according to the U.S. defense plans. Welcome to Mech Wars. We all knew it was going to be here at some point. I'm about to be 36 this month, 35. And when I was a kid, they had this game called Mech Wars, and you actually had to use your imagination because the video games, the 24-bit, 8-bit, 16-bit, whatever it was, format, Tandy computers and the like that you may have been using, or your ColecoVision, it lacked. It still lacked. And so Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games still happened in the mind of kids. And Mech Warriors was a fine example of what we thought the future would be like. And we were correct. We absolutely were. Well, at least the science fiction or science reality writers of the day that projected what would happen forward. I mean, we might not be on track for 1984, but we are definitely living in a braver, newer world. Back to the article here. There are many other reasons why the U.S. military is on path to become Google's single largest customer. Likewise, these reasons indicate Google has a closer working relationship with the NSA than it acknowledges publicly. First, consider the military value of Google's research and development efforts. and the matching contracting pipeline revenue it could represent. Page created Google X, which is Google's secretive research and development lab tasked with pursuing, quote, moonshot technology breakthroughs. So far, Google X is best known for its earthbound self-driving cars and Google Glass. Tellingly, the purpose of the original moonshots by the Soviet Union and America was military. The two Cold War superpowers were in a space race to publicly showcase the technological and military supremacy of their rival ideologies. Yeah, we just heard this week, maybe you have, if you haven't, the dark side of the moon is turquoise. If you've ever wondered what color the dark side of the moon that was referenced in the Pink Floyd album was or is, according to NASA and scientists, it's actually a turquoise color. I don't know if that's messaging or if that means something, but that came out this week as well. So we talk about this really shines the light on the military and space aspirations and terraforming aspirations of the Googleplex and how it's going to be integrated into just about everything. And if you look at the cars today, the technology, autonomous driving cars, 2020, I think it's going to happen much quicker. The only thing that is slowing some of these technologies down is the Congress, is local representatives that are still holding out, but there's a lot of money in military applications, and they will use the term jobs, and more jobs to justify just about everything that Google does. If you didn't hear, there's 1,600 people that camped out for one job, 1,500, 1,600 people, depending on your source. A line wrapped nearly around an entire city block on Friday as approximately 1,500 people waited in Queens for a chance to apply for a coveted job. There was also this huge amount of people trying to get union jobs, or I don't know if it's a union job, but trying to work at some ice cream factory. Nonetheless, we keep hearing about this recovery, and it is exactly what we've said over and over again. To quote Larry Summers, we are having if I could say it, a statistical recovery and a human decline. So if you're in the stock market, or if you use that as a metric for looking at what the economy is doing, you watch that ticker tape and it keeps going up, up, up. Maybe you're saying, well, everything's okay. Things are going to be just fine, and the economy is doing well. And if you're one of these 1,500 people that is vying for a crappy job, maybe union jobs are great, but working in a factory, to all of our factory workers, it's not saying that it's a crappy job. It might be a great job, and if you get enough bennies and you get enough time off, it might not be too bad. But I just think that when you look at those kind of jobs, there's so many people that harken back to the day when we had the economy that was built around the manufacturing basis, and they look at that as a staple for what is and should be the future of this nation. NAFTA 20 years back, just to derail for a moment, looking at NAFTA, it just had its 20th anniversary. We look at it and we see that it's a huge failure. Though I see some media organizations hailing the success, but when you look at the reality, the statistical and human recovery that has not happened, and actually the offshoring of jobs and the industries that provided them through tax incentives, through loopholes that NAFTA legislation, GATT, CAFTA, and these other New World Order globalized initiatives and treaties have become. You got to ask yourself, why are they trying to fast track TPP? I mean, it doesn't take Doug Owen or a genius out there to look at what's really happening. And more people are doing that. And that's the great thing about even social media and the technology that we have today. And that is the ability to shine the light on the realities in communities and get a global viewership, a global view of what's happening. So people can really compare and contrast to what's happening in their own communities. And then we get a broader picture, a better picture of what's really happening right under our noses. So TV has been pretty much a common technology that all of us have used to relate with one another, especially people of my generation. Maybe not so much now, which is great, but even my father's generation, going back maybe even to the advent of the TV, and prior to that, the radio. Television has been this common context that we have all had. We could talk about, Who Loves Raymond. We could talk about Family Ties, all of these TV shows, in each year, maybe 10 to 15 of them that we can all share moments in. And we all have this collective consciousness that has been created through television networks. And it is something that brings us together. Not that I'm for this, but this is something that lets most human beings in this country and in their own nations really relate with one another. It's the common statism, nationalism, and network television shows that we all enjoy. Have you been watching what's happening with Sons of Anarchy? Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the one thing that people find a common bond or a common thread through. But I think one of the beautiful things is that we're seeing that diminish. It's going to make the world more interesting. When you talk to somebody, they're not all, hopefully, we have more thoughts in our heads than, trying to grasp what happened in the last season of Lost or some other network TV, super mega drama. This came out just yesterday. Network news viewers at an all-time low, half under age 30 never watch news. Now, these are the kids that are going to be rebelling because they're not part of the system. They're not on board with the message. This came out of CNS. Network news viewers are declining at unprecedented rates from an average of 48 million nightly news network viewers in 1985 to 24.5 million in 2013. And if you look at these demographics, young people 18 to 29 are the least likely, and I was as well, to watch network news regularly. That's because they're probably working jobs in the evening. If you look at, all of the reasons why kids and people that are 18 to 29 are not watching news, I don't think it's because of the lack of, I think it's more due to the lack of spare time and the lack of being in a static position waiting for the nightly news. But if you've watched it lately with high def television, it's really taken off a lot of the professionalism and the facade. You start seeing these guys and they look hokey. They look cheesy. I was watching the NBC News coverage at my parents' house over the holidays because they are in that demographic. They're absolutely in the last dying demographic. Nothing against my parents, not dying. Knock on wood. I don't want to say that, but that is a demographic of people in this country that are slowly going away over the next 20 years. If you're 65, you may be not here. But if you think about that, if you're 65 years old, you still got, potentially 25, 30 years to go with modern technology and medicine. And that's what really scares the hell out of me, just to really veer off the path. And that is, my God, I'm only 35. If I live another 35 years, the technologies and the technocracy that we will live under. Some people are worried more about economic crisis, 2014, martial law. I have to be honest. I'm more worried about moving into this technologically controlled Gattaca world where things don't turn out that bad, but we all just kind of progressively move to this state where we have none of our original amendment rights. The Bill of Rights has been nullified because technology has engulfed us all for, cheap entertainment, being able to get things on demand in our brains. That is something that, I would only imagine my grandparents, going from living, in 1920, 1930, being raised in that era, and now looking at iPads and thinking, wow, what a huge transformation the world has seen because of technology, and now that it's exponentially, rapidly moving faster and faster and faster and faster each and every day, where we're going to be I don't know. But, Google's building neural networks. They're building high-tech weapons and humanoid robots that probably will be doing most of this manufacturing work anyway. If you saw this week, they have a computer, it's a computer that runs this robotic mechanized system that makes the perfect burger every time. So as soon as you look at anything, potential legislation to increase minimum wage, where you're going to have this huge amount of human investment quickly with the technology we have today, you can find a response, an answer, maybe even something that's going to be a great pitch for what you're doing through robotics and through autonomous AI services. So anyway, TV viewership, all-time lows. Older people are the only ones still watching it. If you look at the percentages, it's transferring to the internet, the amount of viewers and viewership that and ultimately, I don't know if it's much better, but because if you see a viral video, there's a good chance everybody you know has seen it on Facebook. Facebook has been one of these disseminators that I think is way beyond the network news. So we see the transition there, and this is one of the great things is that you can make a viral video, something that's hilarious, something that's funny, like Joy Camp, something that's even politically incorrect, can get a lot of presence on the internet, more so than even U.S. network news or terrestrial radio through YouTube. And that is not completely controlled, though somewhat maybe coaxed and manipulated in viewership and the like. But this is a sign of things changing, and how it changes really depends on how we use the internet and what the overall, the transition from TV to internet has happened, not through just, DARPA creations, but also through demand that people have and the ability to make technology more attractive to people. So it's ultimately us that, are the X factor in how this is all laid out. One of the sad repercussions in all of this is that the children are being pacified and brainwashed and damaged by TV. I could go on and on and on about how much TV I watched as a child, but most of the TV that I watched did nothing for me other than making me feel inadequate and really gave me a chip on the shoulder because I was unable to afford the things that I saw all of these kids that were cool they had. And, it's just a kind of empty consumerism that is, or at least is what I got from watching television. Only in my late 20s and 30s have I been able to really reflect on the impact that TV at a very young age really had on me. Giving you the neural pathways and gave you a world experience. You think about New York City? Well, I thought about Sesame Street, Oscar the Grouch, Maria, the nice old white guy. Those people, and that's the impression that you have of what the rest of the world looks like from your small, Texas town or wherever it is that you may have lived. So anyway, I know I'm banging the drum on this, but children who watch too much TV may have damaged brain structures. Maybe it's good. They talk about the gray matter and having lots more of it in your neural, the forward cortex here. Watching too much television can change the structure of a child's brain in a damaging way, according to a new study. I say the more gray matter, the more filter that you may have for bull crap and propaganda. Researchers found that the more time a child spent viewing TV, the more profound the brain alterations appeared to be. The Japanese study looked at 276 children aged between 5 and 18 who watched between 0 and 4 hours of TV per day, the average being about 2 hours. Too much TV can actually change the structure of a child's brain in a way which can lead to lower verbal intelligence. Just listen to me. MRI brain scans showed children who spent the most hours in front of the box had greater amounts of gray matter in regions around the frontopolar cortex, the area at the front of the frontal lobe. And it could, remember when people would say, well, you're exciting electrons at a CRT tube, and by putting your face too close to the TV, it could blind you. I think a lot of this could be, in this research, let's see when it was conducted, but I still believe that, sitting in front of a television, especially in the 80s and 90s, tube televisions, you're getting a good dose of radiation. How much? Probably as much as the people on the beach on California are getting from Fukushima. Probably much more. We're kind of worried about the wrong things, and this is something that the industry will never admit. It's just like, the electric industry will never admit that living underneath the power lines in an electromagnetic field, where we've seen scientific proof that it actually makes cows spin in circles counter to, and this is just one of many anecdotal studies that is peer-reviewed, that proves that it does alter the mind, where you have cows eating in the counterclockwise direction. But if they're not under the power lines, they always eat in the proper rotation, the clockwise rotation. If you watch a lot of cows and monitor them, you can do your own scientific experiment. But the point is that we know that there's a problem. We know that it does alter the mind. Nobody wants to admit it. And if they're hiding any of it, you have to ask yourself, how bad could it really be? If they're so worried that you knowing this, it will give you the power to sue the crap out of them, then it's got to be pretty profound. And I think that about tube TVs, because as a guy who worked on them in the military, I immediately noticed the whole idea, the premise of exciting these electrons on a tube or through the tube is probably if you sitting there next to it can't be that great for you. It's like living right next to the Wi-Fi router or your smart meter or the microwave. All of the science, and there's so much to prove that, Doug Owen, this, he's spitting conspiracy theories, and all of these things have been proven as totally safe, totally legitimate. Dare you question these things? People that don't question that, I think that most people do. They inherently know, and it's just one of those things. Well, yeah, they're never going to admit it, but anyway. Yeah, so if you watch too much television, you probably have a damaged brain. That doesn't mean that if you watched a lot of television that you can't see through most of the bull crap in this world. But I did want to mention this. Talking about perceived and manipulated results, U.S. tried to ouster Hamid Karzai by manipulating Afghan elections. Now, this guy, Robert Gates, he used to be the chancellor. He's the head of Texas A&M, Agricultural and Mechanical University, and he was the former defense secretary. He came out with this book. He tried to get the Afghan war to wind down back in 2009, and if you look at what has happened since, we had this thing called the surge. I know all of you Democrat, liberal, progressive types don't want to talk about the casualties and the warmongering president that you have supported blindly, and the fact that the casualties have only accelerated under the Obama regime and with the surge. Oh, yes, the surge. So, anyway, this book has a lot of little nuggets and goodies in it, and it has people on Capitol Hill a little upset because it's just speaking a little bit too much truth to the masses. Not that I think that we aren't cynical enough anyway. I mean, when you look at the polls, people don't trust Congress. Over 50% of the people think that the government is more scary than Al-Qaeda, and why wouldn't they? Because we're supporting them almost everywhere. It's openly admitted that we are supporting terrorists, extremists, Wahhabists, jihadists, other a-holes around the world. The terrorists that we support and give money to and weapons to are vicious. They cut people's heads off. They cut their organs out just for fun. I mean, it's really whacked. It's really horrid. And so I think most people are engaging in cognitive dissonance. Okay, the government's not, we want to win the war, but look at what we're doing. How could we win the war? Okay, anything. I mean, if you just have people talk about blowback, this term. Yes, we have blowback. Well, how could you not have blowback? I mean, if you look at how this war is being conducted and the people that we've given cash payments to, like Hamid Karzai, I mean, we really just backed the wrong people over and over and over again. And, well, I mean, the honest reality is that we've turned Afghanistan into a decentralized opium haven, the production there of which we're using to dump into European and Russian markets and into the pharmaceutical industrial complexes, oxycodone and all those fine drugs that Americans are so addicted to. All right, so back to Robert Gates here. Robble. Top U.S. diplomats connived in delaying the Afghan presidential election in 2009 and then tried to manipulate the outcome in a clumsy and failed putsch. That P-U-T-S-C-H, putsch, I guess, push. It's a Guardian, so that's probably an English term that I'm not up on. It was aimed to oust Hamid Karzai because he's a bad guy, I guess, and his brother robbed the central bank before they killed him in Abu Dhabi before the Mossad whacked him. But anyway, nonetheless, the defense secretary at the time, Robert Gates, has said, so this is a hell of an admission, right? I mean, this just gets the rest of the Middle Eastern world and what's left of the Western world really, really mad at the U.S. Well, all of this intentionally to demonize the U.S., to unify the new world that they're trying to create in the Middle East, and unsuccessfully thus far in Africa, the new colonization, the new Western fronts. So anyway, top U.S. diplomats did this. Not a surprise. They're all spooks. In a memoir to be published next week. Ooh, and everybody's excited about it because this guy, I mean, he's going to get rich off of this book. It's going to be a New York Times bestseller. The only thing that could amp the amount of awareness and the PR push for this book is going to be if the CIA stops it from being published or takes different excerpts and removes them. But apparently this is all for your consumption. Believe you me, they've already gone through this. Okay, if there's any legal liability, they have lawyers go through every one of these pages. They have read this book with a fine-tuned comb, and they know if there is anything that would make this guy or his statements liable or somehow endanger in the national security state's opinion that this could be dangerous, they would immediately take it off the shelves. Immediately. So keep that in mind, people, when you hear these huge admissions. They want everyone to know that the U.S. government manipulates the outcome of these elections, and yet we're led to believe that that doesn't happen in this country. I think that, just a sidebar, we could talk about Chris Christie, okay? He's not going to be your president because he's too fat. I'll say it. I'll be the first person to say it, okay? He looks like, and the media will paint him out to be obese, undesirable. It's just not going to happen. I mean, and that's what you have with Chris Christie. Even if he has all of the political credentials and the it factor that is needed for him to become president, it's just not going to happen. So I don't even want to have the discussion. Too easy. Low-hanging fruit. Cannon fodder. What he did during Superstorm Sandy, and I hate to even use that term because that's some BS political term so that the insurance companies don't have to pay insurance. They don't have to pay claims to the people that were affected by Hurricane Sandy. So anyway, my point is that, all the political shenanigans, all of this manipulation, if he's going to be able to close down a bridge or not, or just his crony sycophant staff is able to close down this bridge. Ultimately, the allegations is that it killed one person because of delays on the bridge. C'est la vie. That's politics. I'm not surprised that people are appalled by one person dying. But it shows you how dirty politics 101 is in this country. Okay, so if you think politics in Afghanistan's dirty, it's nothing compared to the politics of the day right here in this country. Okay, if they're manipulating elections and poll results and the rest in Afghanistan, where it should be pretty damn easy, it should be, I think, a lot easier than maybe even in this country, just due to the amount of population or the lack thereof in Afghanistan comparatively. It's really hard to skew, 300 million votes. Not that we get that many in this country, but if everyone did go out and vote, all the new Americans and liberals that are running across the borders. Anyway, I mean, I don't want to bag on Robert Gates here, because I think at the end of the day, he was somebody who was compromised, he was limited, he was handled, and now he's got a book that pretty much explains this, among other dirty detailings of the Obama administration and its war of terror. So there you go. There's some anti-Westernism for you. Here's some other looks around the world, what's happening in Russia with its FSB and FSO. They are going to be, just like U.S. government, monitoring negatively minded citizens through the blogs and social networks. If you're anti-Putin, maybe you're a fan of Pussy Riot, maybe, or the new 501c3 nonprofit foundation that they are renaming something pink, something feminist. I forget what it is. Not that I'm against feminists or anything. I don't care. It's their political belief system. It's another ism, but isn't it a little contrived? Isn't it a little convenient? Isn't their punk rock music and the fact that their name is Pussy Riot, doesn't that bring a little bit of popularity and PR to it? Speaking of which, before we talk about the negatively minded citizens, and I can only imagine what that would mean in this country. How many of you are negatively minded listening to this broadcast? And would the Federal Security Bureau or the FSO in Russia care about it if you were so anti-Russian in Russia? Maybe, maybe not. But I have to comment on Coinye. If you haven't heard of Coinye, it's a Bitcoin clone, and the original iconography, labeling, or whatnot on the coins was a picture of Kanye West, and it's the one from this satirical South Park episode about Kanye West and his gay love for a fish. I know it sounds stupid, and it really is. So, but nonetheless, the Bitcoin, they have Litecoin, they have just a variety of different coins, and actually, it's pretty neat. This whole notion or idea that you could start your own currency. One of the, I think, the antithesis to the Federal Reserve and to nation state bank money is creating your own currency. And you can do that with virtual currencies, although I don't think that they're a total solution. We are living in an age where you can start your own bank, which I think is pretty cool. It's at least a step in the right direction, and it gets people involved in creating their own local currencies and their own banking systems, and it brings more awareness to the banking systems that are going to be rivaling nation and state currencies. So I think it's cool in that regard. Is it all electronic? Is it totally monitored and tracked and traced? Sure, it absolutely is, and that's going to be the con of it. But you can print physical Bitcoins. You can print these, and with the advent of barcode readers and Bluetooth technology and the like, maybe not so much Bluetooth, but especially with the barcode readers and the QR codes you see with phones, you can pretty much transfer money peer to peer outside of a lot of these systems, which is really really cool. You can print the physical Bitcoin and probably transfer that in some form or fashion. I'm not an expert, but there's pros and cons to any of these systems. I think the big pro is that it's anti-state, that it's independent. And one of the things that I have to say that's great about Coinye is that it was able to get the attention of Kanye West, who is this rap superstar phenom that's married to Kim Kardashian. For any of you not living here in the bubble of the United States of America and our media consortium, just to get you up to speed. Some people are probably, there's like 10% of you that are probably confused and have no idea what Kanye West is really about. Anyway, they've changed it to where Kanye is not, it depicts a gay fish on their coins. And all of this is brilliant PR. That is my grander point. All of this silliness surrounding Hollywood pop stars and celebrity is good PR for this coin. It's going to rival Bitcoin, and if it does very well, it's already getting the immediate attention that it may be undeserved and unappreciated by the Kanye people. But I think it's pretty funny because it shows you how you can get your 5 minutes of fame, how you can make something go viral because you attach it to celebrity. So anyway, back to Russia, which is often hailed as this counter to Western domination. Of course, if you watch RT, as I do, many of the shows and the interviews I think are riveting. Great stuff that you're not going to see MSNBC, NBC, ABC, CBS, CNN, or any of these other clowns broadcasting. It's going to be a viewpoint that is original and individual, though maybe for the Russian flavor. Are they going to publish this? Are they going to be hypercritical of Vladimir Putin and the FSB? We'll see. We'll see. And I don't care if they're not, because I go to U.S. media to give me the hyperbole against Russia and against China. I go to Chinese media to see what's happening in Africa. I go to African media to see what's happening in Russia. And likewise, you just have to kind of look at it from a different tangent, if you will. But Invetsia has this piece, and it really does highlight how with just a few terror attacks, it doesn't take much, and the Russians have now taken the cue, and they're following the Bush doctrine, hook, line, sinker, step by step, in tune with these same PR talking points and using those against the people of Russia. Since then, the Federal Security Services, of course, they want to have this database of negatively minded citizens. Okay? I mean, who's not on board? Who's not on board with this system? It's pretty self-explanatory. So, talking about this, I got a snip here. It's not about control or tightening some nuts, they said. Just when we are able to monitor bloggers and create a database, it will be easier to track and prevent many egregious incidents. Pre-crime. Okay, all of you anarchists, all of you Pussy Riot fans, look, we are able to make everything more peaceful and happy for the rest of us if we can mitigate you. Just the vernacular that they use is pretty funny, but it works. That's why they keep going with it. For example, before two activists of the banned National Bolshevik Party, we all hate them, pelted tomatoes at the King of the Netherlands in the Grand Hall of the Moscow Conservatory, which I thought was hilarious. The King of the Netherlands, I mean, they are the purveyors of apartheid and economic enslavement. Can we not throw some tomatoes, or for the Russians, tomatoes, at the king? I mean, come on. That's great. It's almost as good as when that guy threw the shoe at Bush in Iraq. He got flogged, and they probably killed him, and he was assassinated, and I think he died, and his family was tortured afterwards. But, I mean, it was great hilarity for the day. So, anyway, this is what they're going to be doing there. So, the manipulation of the people, the media, and the rest are... it's not exclusive to the U.S. It's why we have to look at the nation state for what it is. And it looks out for its own best interests. Okay. It looks out for what it considers to be national security. I mentioned this on Doomcast 23. I recorded live with Charlie McGrath this Wednesday evening, and we do that at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, 7 p.m. Mountain, and I guess that would make it 9 Eastern on Wednesday nights, usually. If you go to Doomcast.com, we're revamping the website there as well. But we had talked about the overall change in perception, and we mentioned some of these exact same articles, one of which I wanted to mention. I'm trying to think of it. It escapes me. I was thinking about the podcast too much. But nonetheless, it's good to listen to, and maybe you can comment on what I may have been thinking there for a moment. Sorry. Sometimes you want to segue, and I'm looking at two things here, and before you know it, I get going too fast for my mouth and my brain. Anyway, I did want to mention the engage button on blacklistednews.com. It has a trending article section, the top 5 trending stories. And I thought it'd be interesting to wrap up this podcast with, because this is actually user oriented. The more people look at these articles, comment on them, and vote for them, the higher up it trends. We don't have any kind of algorithm that monitors or any kind of dig, edit bans or moderators that can snuff your article or the certain content that we don't want to get to the top. So I just wanted to mention these. I think it would be a great way to look at what people on blacklistednews.com are actually interested in, or the most trending and popular stories. Number 3 here. Cops use armored vehicles to deliver shock and awe during police work. If you haven't heard some of the great quotes from these police chiefs, basically saying that the reason they use this is to scare people into compliance. You should check this out. Raw Story originally published it, and we reposted it from Repost. As the U.S. military operations wind down overseas, some of that surplus hardware has been used to equip cash-strapped local police departments. Police and sheriff's departments have been given at least 165 mine-resistant, ambush-protected vehicles since this summer, according to the recent WAPO analysis. The vehicles cost about $500,000, $500,000 at the height of the Iraq War, but they've been donated or sold for about $2,000 to $3,000 to local law enforcement agencies as part of a national military surplus program. That would be great if I could buy a $3,000 mine-resistant tank. And you know what's the funny thing? I bet you there's an auction house somewhere in this country that you could probably buy one if you really wanted to. You can buy tanks. Every once in a while, we'll get somebody in an M1A1 going crazy and riding through, stealing a tank. There was one incident where a guy stole a tank, was riding over cars and whatnot. And I think it was not this July 4th. Yeah, it was the past July 4th. The guy was riding around. He has a tank in his garage, and in the patriotic fervor that he had, he drove it around town with flags on it, and it turned out that he was a domestic terrorist. People were terrorized and freaked out by seeing a guy in a tank driving around, as they probably should, and didn't turn out well. So apparently you can get tanks. That was my point, people. The military was pretty much handing them out to the different cities, and I put in an application for it. It says Keith Holmes, officer at Fort Pierce, Florida, Police Department, the relatively small coastal city, ranked 56th last year in gun violence, with 150 shootings and about 42,000 residents, according to the Center for Disease Control. I guess gun crime is a disease. That's why the CDC monitors it. Maybe. They brought this back from Afghanistan, and now it's at Fort Pierce for officer rescues, search warrants, things like that an officer would need protection, Holmes said. And as they throw more people out of their homes, according to Holmes, they're going to have these things. People are going to be pulled out from their homes, and it's getting to be quite a big deal. More and more people are, for whatever reason, in violation of the state. It's really easy to get a warrant. You get a traffic ticket, don't have the money, can't afford it, don't show up for court. Before you know it, you're in a debtor's prison, and they have a tank in your front yard. In California, they might just take your car and sell it and auction it against your will. Well, that's pretty much a normal thing. But if you look at these SWAT tactical tanks that they have, it's pretty ridiculous. And one of the things that we always heard about these wars of aggression is that we wanted to fight them over there so they couldn't come over here and harm us. And the reason that we had all of this huge push of cash into the research and development of all of these high-tech weapons was to be used against those that would do this country harm. And just 10 years later, not even that, 11 years later, we now see how much of that is being used against the people in this country. Obviously, it's being used against the enemies, domestic. That is the change. That was what I wanted to mention. I wanted to mention the national security change at the FBI. The FBI used to be in the business of law enforcement. You break the law, maybe the FBI, if it's a federal law, would investigate you. That's why it was called the Federal Bureau of Investigations. They would go, they would investigate, and if there was a crime, they would take you to jail. They would charge you, and you would go to a trial. Well, they have changed their mission statement. It's very, very important to note this because they've changed the mission statement to national security. Now, what is national security? Well, who knows what national security may be? If you live in Russia, the FSB may think it's that negatively minded citizens are creating an atmosphere of fear and Russian sentiment. And that is justification for monitoring you, creating a dossier, and maybe extracting you from your home with a tank. So Russia's on the same path as the U.S., and sadly, we're in the same path as the Chinese, who have been monitoring, rounding up, and re-educating dissidents. We're not too far from that. So as the Chinese move more and more towards a somewhat democratic state because of capitalism and because of the sharing of power, that's what it really comes down to. When you have billions of people, you have to share the power. You have to have a system that empowers other people to basically be other power brokers and important captains of industry and power. And that's what you have with the capitalistic, fascistic state of China. Ultimately, the result is more and more commoners have more power. At what cost? Well, maybe the cost of the environment, the cost of human strife and enslavement. But you do have this sharing power, and this is changing things. Just like in this country, it took a long time for us to actually fulfill the destiny, maybe, or at least get closer to living under a constitutional government where all men are seen as equal. It's not quite there, but it might even be going too far. Now, people's sexual orientation and their financial prowess and their education all now become traits that are protected and people that are protected. I mean, that's one of the things that they're using against old Chris Christie. He's a bully. Now we have this kind of push for this bully meme in this country, and what it's being used to do is basically emasculate people, including you ladies, taking your pair away and trying to get us all to kind of cohese into this world where we just have no opinions and we have nothing to say. That's why I think it's great that we do see this huge transition, and I think that ultimately we are seeing more power being distributed to people through this podcast. I mean, this is just a figment of the microcosm. When you look at the ability for media to expand and be decentralized and to have our thoughts be decentralized, this is something that is just amazing. Though it doesn't always feel that way, because sometimes through all of this enlightenment, we start seeing what's really been happening for years and years and years, and I think that that's important to highlight. It's all been happening for years and years and years, and now, just now, we're starting to see some of that corruption. All right, guys, so that is going to be our time today. I want to thank all of you for joining me in this live 11th day of January 2014 edition of Blacklisted News Radio. I'll be back Wednesday for Doomcast number 24 with my co-host, Charlie McGrath. Doomcast.com is the website for that. I'll be back for this show again, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, Saturday morning for the live edition of Blacklisted News Radio. Hope you have a great weekend, and keep it tuned right here. We'll have more online at blacklistednews.com. In the meantime, take care.